Well, hello and welcome. That's not a good start. Let's try that again. Hello and welcome to another fun filled edition of Adam's Music Box, where today we are doing the Sunday live stream, which generally happens after the Saturday live stream. And yesterday was an interesting day for me because I had forgotten all about this charity concert that went on in LA on, I believe, Friday evening at the Forum in Inglewood. Now, this was a huge concert that luckily is all over YouTube. YouTube from its official channel, NBC, all of the networks. It's easy to find, it's everywhere. And I had been at that point until yesterday when I found it, been growing a bit tired of these big charity concerts. We all know about the hypocrisy, not with all of them, but with some would say most. And the grandstanding and the politicizing. And I'm a bass player in Dionne Warwick's band, but now it's my turn to run for Senate. We all know about that. But I'm actually talking about musically. It seemed like the heyday of these larger than life concerts was sort of past its prime. So I was really, really pleasantly surprised with yesterday's concert. Or Friday's rather. It was the right mix of everything. It was a good balance between legacy artists, super contemporary artists, and relatively contemporary artists. It was a good balance between sort of contemplative and demure type of music and very sort of let's forget the troubles temporarily and have a good time. The audience looked like they were into it. um it was really one of the better of these concerts, maybe since 2001's concert for New York City, which is arguably the best charity concert of all time, mainly because of the Who stealing the show. But this is a very different kind of concert, a very different kind of city. The concert for New York City was all about sort of musical muscle and giving the police and firemen who had seen unspeakable horrors, giving them an opportunity to release everything, and of course the families with them. This was very different, and there are definitely some interesting over and undertones, to use a musical reference. For those who don't know the map of LA, the two areas that were most badly hit by the fire are a kind of, if you're looking at LA horizontally, they're at opposite ends of the county. On the one hand, you have the incredibly wealthy area of Malibu and the damn wealthy area of Pacific Palisades on the coastal end of the county. And then on the inland side of the county, just beneath the foothills of the San Gabriel Mountains, you have Altadena, a traditionally working and middle class area, which, like all places, has become more expensive, but still. It's definitely demographically different, and the fires were devastating. I mean, there have been pretty bad fires in that part of the world before, but none as bad as this. And so there were a lot of interesting things at play here, because the musicians were actually raising funds for some people that they knew. A lot of people in the industry, usually on the behind the line, under the line rather side, technicians and grips and people like that live in places like the San Fernando Valley and the San Gabriel Valley. And of course, many of the well to do artists and film and in music live in places like Pacific Palisades, Malibu, Santa Monica, etc. So it was an interesting dynamic, to say the least. But luckily, there were no political speeches. There was no preaching of that particular sort. It was all really, really classy, frankly. So I've got a set list here in front of me. Um, and I wanted to sort of run through some of the songs that were played because it was all really good. And I'll give sort of my comments on what I thought. So let's just go. So the opening of the concert was Green Day, and they opened it up with Billie Eilish singing on Last Night on Earth. And that sort of set the tone for a show where, okay, are we going to play songs about disasters? Are we going to play songs about LA culture? And the answer was yes, were they going to play sort of emotional and cathartic songs? And the answer was yes as well. I'm talking about all the artists here, but not so much that it overwhelmed the event. There were plenty of greatest hits, let's be fair, when you have a concert like this, like the concert for New York City, like Live Aid and its other iterations, like Farm Aid, you want to hear the greatest hits. That's what these concerts are for. You want to hear them. If it's Foreigner, you want to hear them play "I Want to Know What Love Is" and "Feels Like the First Time." If you don't want to hear Paul McCartney singing some experimental Tibetan drum music that he did with Linda, you want him to play, "Yesterday" and "Hey Jude." That's just how it is. So that was the opening song, and then they did "I'm Still Alive," cathartic theme, and then they one of their greatest hits, "When I Come Around." And then you have Alanis Morissette, who also did some of the hosting duties. A lot of musicians sort of stepped in to do some of the hosting duties, and she, like many of the artists, did two of her hugest hits, which is "Hand in My Pocket" and "Thank You." She's as good as ever. She put on a great performance, as did Green Day. So far, so good. Then it really got interesting, and I really started to get into it because you had Anderson Paak, really good, innovative drummer who sort of merges the worlds of sort of R&B, tiny bit of jazz fusion, and hip hop, and he does it really well. And the band that he played with were excellent. He opened up his set with "Put Me Through," and then he invited the wonderful percussionist Sheila E. of Prince and the Revolution fame, Pancakes. To come and do "Come Down." And then another very special guest, someone who's produced and sort of mentored, discovered, if you will, Anderson Paak, and this is Dr. Dre. Anderson was a big part of Dr. Dre's huge Super Bowl halftime show from a couple of years ago in Inglewood, took place literally right next door to the Forum. And so he comes on and he does "Still DRE" with Anderson Paak's band and with Sheila E. on percussion, and then he finishes it off with "California Love," and you kind of have to do it. And so at this point, we were taking a step back from the cathartic stuff and we're having fun. Anderson Paak, Dr. Dre, Sheila E., so much talent, so much fun. I really enjoyed that set. And then things turned to a completely different direction, which I think was good in terms of the order of the show. Once you get down from the sort of high of California Love, we take things back and we have Joni Mitchell playing her beautifully contemplative song, Both Sides Now. Now, this is the first time I'd seen Joni Mitchell on stage in a long time, and she's old. She was walking with a stick and she was performing clutching the stick in a sort of big chair. And, she could barely sing, but the emotion was there. But obviously, it reminded me of just what a good song that is, how many great artists have sung it. Frank Sinatra on the Cycles album did my favorite version, frankly, of that song with a great arrangement by my favorite arranger, Don Costa. So definitely check that out. Then you had Dawes come on, and they did, Time Spent in Los Angeles again. A lot of references because it's not like you're playing in a Timbuktu. Sure, there probably are songs about Timbuktu. So obviously there are going to be a lot of songs referencing LA. Then you had whoa, what the hell was that? Then you had something special with Dawes. You had Stephen Stills, originally from the Buffalo Springfield, along with Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers guitarist Mike Campbell, and they did For What It's Worth. Now, Stephen Stills, God bless him, I don't know if he was old. I don't know if he was on some sort of painkiller, but it was interesting to watch. It held together better than you would have imagined, because that song is about LA as well. It's about the LA Sheriff's Department and the and what was then unincorporated LA County, specifically the Sunset Strip, enforcing a very unpopular curfew among young people, because that was an era when the Sunset Strip had been the kind of black bow tie, martini sipping, sophisticated scene. But the kids were sort of starting to take it over. Rock clubs were starting to pop up. And some of the older businesses didn't want the young kids with the long hair and the tie dye to invade the space of the bow tie and martini crowd. A curfew on young people was imposed. It wasn't popular. There was in hindsight, a pretty small ride compared to what we've seen in recent years, but it was felt big at the time. And the sheriff's department did what they did, and Buffalo Springfield wrote a song about it. So there's the history lesson. Neil Young also part of that. On the original album, he wasn't there, and it worked. And then, of course, another Crosby, Stills, Nash alum, the C in CSN, came and did "Teach Your Children," and that would have been. Did I say the C? No, I can't spell, ladies and gentlemen. It was Graham Nash, and he did a great job. He was a bit more with it than Stephen, but Stephen perked up into life when he saw his old friend. So that was really special. I'm really glad they did that. Then comes what is arguably the best, if not one of the best performances of the night. And this is Pink. Now, Pink is she's relatively contemporary. I mean, she came out in the early 2000s, and although some of her early hits were sort of danceable pop, she has got a real musical, bluesy, soulful, rocky voice. And her performance was not only perfect, tasteful, but it was really riveting. She started out with What About Us, then she did a wonderful version of the Janis Joplin song, Me and Bobby McGee, and then these were all sort of done relatively low key, but then they really rock it out. They did a cover of one of my favorite Zeppelin songs, "Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You," from the first album, and wow. I know what you're thinking, female pop star doing no, just watch. You'll love it if you're a Zeppelin fan. They really did it justice. As Heart did some Zeppelin songs justice at one of their sort of Kennedy Awards from a few years back. So either Robert Plant is a bit feminine or female vocalists really have a thing for Robert Plant. Maybe both. This channel's free, folks. Send your complaints somewhere else. Next, Rod Stewart came. And he's still got it. He's got the charm. The voice isn't quite what it was, but it's still pretty good for his age. Speaking of age, he opened up with Forever Young, again, one of these sort of cathartic songs. Then he did Maggie May, one of the greatest hits that everyone wants to hear. And he ended with People Get Ready, which is obviously traditional gospel song. Curtis Mayfield did probably the most famous version, but Jeff Beck and Rod Stewart did a version of it as well. And it was great, really great. Then came on John Mayer, who did Neon and Gravity, and the audience seemed to really like him. He's always got those sort of puppy dog eyes, and he's always sort of up for some good catharsis. So he gave the hometown crowd what they wanted, and then he did a really cool acoustic arrangement of Tom Petty's "Free Fallin'," which the audience seemed to really dig. Then the surviving members of Earth, Wind and Fire did three of their huge hits. "That's the Way of the World," absolutely love that song. "Shining Star" and "September." Now, Maurice White, obviously not with us anymore, but the surviving members and the new members did a remarkable job. There's never been a bad iteration of Earth, Wind, and Fire. Then we have the Black Crows. They come on and do Remedy, probably their biggest hit, and they do it great. Then they brought on again another contender for one of the best of the night. This is just one of the finest songs ever written. I've said so many a time. Creedence Clearwater. Well, John Fogerty wrote it, but "Have You Ever Seen the Rain?" So John came. I think he dyes his hair, but his voice sounded almost the same as it did in the 60s. And he did "Have You Ever Seen the Rain?" Just a beautiful song. He introduced by saying this is a song about rainbows, which is with the rainstorms that have come, something LA kind of needs, except for the mudslide problem. But in any case, it was really beautiful and really well done. And then the Black Crowes were joined by Slash for a version of "Going to California," another Led Zeppelin hit, this time about California. So just really well done. Gracie Abrams was next. She said, "I Love You, I'm Sorry," which is I thought a really, one of those cathartic ones. And then she did a cover of the song "Along December" from Counting Crows. That was a pretty big hit of theirs in the 90s, and I thought she did a really good job on that. Really good song, that. Then came on a reunion of No Doubt, and Gwen Stefani really got the crowd going. They were perfect. They did "Just a Girl, Don't Speak," and "Spiderwebs," probably the three biggest singles from the band. The audience seemed really into it, and people really liked it. Tate McRae came next, doing "You Broke Me First," and then a cover of another really good 80s song. There were a lot of artists and bands sort of trading between covers and originals, and I thought, again, it was just classy. It was interesting. And they did the Crowded House song "Don't Dream It's Over," which again, one of those cathartic songs. But again, the night wasn't a downer. It might seem like it from the way I'm describing it, but it was actually pretty uplifting, whether you're affected by the event or not. And I know a lot of people even if they're not directly affected, it's always, fires. As I said before, and I'll say it again, learn about the different kinds of fire extinguishers, learn how to use them. Some people don't know how to use them. Learn about things like fire blankets. Learn if you have a certain kind of property, sprinkler systems, but both, I'm talking about both indoor and outdoor. Learn about metal framed windows. Definitely don't have a wood shingle roof if you live in a fire prone area. These are just good things to learn about, even when it's not like a wildfire that may have been intentionally set. Just, shit can happen. So fire safety it's never a bad day to learn about fire safety. And that's my public service announcement. Back to the music. You then had Jelly Roll, who's really been on a sort of a high lately. People have been really digging his stuff. He did I Am Not Okay, again, cathartic theme, and then a song about LA, Hollywood Nights, by the great Detroit artist Bob Seger. And Jelly Roll did a really, really good job, as did his band. From this channel, I love Bob Seger, and it was just really, really well done. So definitely check that out. The whole thing was about 6 hours long when you include sort of the introductions, and while they were doing stage breakdown and setup for the different artists, they would show little sort of 2 minute, 3 minute segments about people who have lost their homes, and inspirational stories about people who have rescued the pets of the people around them. And so that's another reason why it took so long. If you want to fast forward those, you can on the YouTube replay. But some of those are actually, they were done quite well. Then again, arguably one of the people who stole the show, Stevie Nicks, and she did only 3 songs, but it was a long set. And again, it was some of her greatest hits: "Stand Back," "Landslide," "Edge of 17," and she did something that sort of let a cat out of the bag. I was wondering why there weren't any political tirades, because there usually are at these things. And if you're a Republican and Ted Nugent's giving the tirade, you're going to cheer for it. And if you're a Democrat and it's, well, anyone who isn't Ted Nugent giving we can't take ourselves so seriously. Giving a free, then you're going to like it. But when Stevie Nicks said that let a cat out of the bag, she said, I've been told that I'm not supposed to make a speech, but here it goes. And so that means that, they were told not to speak. But don't worry, her speech was totally apolitical. It was beautiful. It was about, because she had a house in I can't remember Malibu or the Palisades, but somewhere, and it was she was worried it was burning down. She talked about thanking God, and very, very, very nice speech. I mean, they didn't want her to make it, but she made it, and I thought hers was very nice. She kept it classy and kept it, on the spiritual side of things. And she's sounding good. No one's at the edge of 17 anymore, but she's still got it, and I think the audience really, really loved it. Then there was Katy Perry. She did Rise, Roar, and then California Girls. The audience really got into that. And then there was something of a Nirvana reunion with the surviving members with different front men and women. I'm not Joan Jett. Obviously, she did one of the songs. She did Territorial Pissings. All Apologies, Violet Grohl and Kim Gordon. Violet Grohl being, I think, David Grohl's daughter. All in all, if you're a Nirvana fan, I think you would have probably appreciated it. Little Baby came on and did So Sorry and Emotionally Scarred. Again, another one of those cathartic songs. I thought it went over really well. Red Hot Chili Peppers came on next, and they're a sort of quintessential California band of the 80s and 90s. So they did Danny California and Californication, Black Summer, very thematic, and then Under the Bridge, another huge hit of theirs. They sounded great. I mean, it's kind of funny because you always think of them as a very sort of teenage, early 20s band, and they're not anymore, but they've still got, I mean, Flea was still half naked on stage, so, giving people a blast from the past of sorts. Olivia Rodrigo actually was really surprisingly good. She really did a great job on Driver's License and Deja Vu. Now we're getting towards the end of the show. So Sting comes on with his band. You might recognize him from the Rick Beato YouTube program. And he breaks out all the greatest hits. He does Message in a Bottle, Driven to Tears, which is sort of a political song, but it can be applied to the many forms of governmental corruption that have gone on in the city of LA, county of LA, and state of California. Because you see, I wasn't at the concert performing, so no one told me not to get political. These politicians all need to go to jail. Okay, back to the music. Then he did Fragile, which again, one of those cathartic songs, very beautiful as always. His voice was a bit hoarse at the beginning, only a bit, but he got into it and he ended up being great. That's someone I'm less familiar with. This is a very popular artist among Spanish language. I believe the artist is called Peso Pluma. I believe he's of Mexican background, and La Bebe was his song. Billie Eilish then came on and did Wildflower, The Greatest, and Birds of the Feather. That seemed to go over really well. And then, of course, you have a huge legend, Stevie Wonder, who opened up with Love's in Need of Love today. He gave his speech as well, but it's the to be fair, the same speech you hear at every Stevie Wonder concert for the last 30, 40, 50 years about how we all need to get together and how love is important. Those things are. Stevie's more of an optimist than I am, but God bless him. He's playing great, sounding great. He's one of those people who never misses a beat. And then Sting came to join him and they did Superstition. They sort of traded vocal lines. It was great. Sting's voice was perfect by then. He must have had a bit of cognac backstage, but it was great. It was just as good as you'd expect. And then Flea comes on stage beside both Sting and Stevie Wonder, and they did Higher Ground, which of course the Red Hot Chili Peppers famously covered. And so Flea is doing the slap bass between Stevie on piano and Sting doing the sort of vocal harmonizing, and it was all really good. Um, and then you have the final act, and I have to say, you could argue that she really stole the show. There were a few show stealers, but Lady Gaga, I have had the privilege to see her in a small jazz club setting. And when you take away the lights and the dancers and all of that, she is someone who she began in small cabarets in New York where there's no auto tune and there's no light shows. She can really sing. Tony Bennett wouldn't have worked with her so much if she couldn't. And this was one of those moments where she didn't have the lights and the dancers. It was her at the piano and a medium-sized ensemble, and she was fantastic. And everything she said was right. She was just, it was like she was born for, they say born this way. Well, she was born for that moment. She did Shallow and Always Remember Us This Way. And then she did something that I think was super classy. And that it's one thing when artists can maybe some of them change the words when there's a certain occasion. We all know Elton John famously did that. But she co-wrote a brand with her husband or fiance rather, a brand new song for the occasion, just for this occasion, and it's called "Time Is a Healer." And it was actually really, really pleasant. It was sort of it sort of left the audience with a good musical taste in their mouth. And so, as someone who's seen her without the lights, and I know that that's the stuff that sells, but when she wants to do the stuff that doesn't sell as much, but that's more musically interesting, she is actually a bona fide real musician. Unlike some people that are very famous today, no names, no names, no names. So overall, I thought it was. Yeah, it was one of the best concerts of this sort of because of disaster nature, I suppose, since the concert for New York City. I mean, obviously there are other concerts, like so they have tribute concerts and things, but when there's a famine or a building falls down or there's a fire that destroys everyone's home, um, people can argue over the comparative merits of doing these things. I think that both sides have a good argument. I think that Frank Zappa was absolutely right when he described Live Aid as the biggest cocaine money laundering operation in history. Great music on the whole, but yeah, the money that did make it to Ethiopia went to their commie dictatorship called the Derg, and they used it to buy Rolls Royces and cocaine. And houses on Lake Geneva. I hope with this, since it's a bit more local, and since a lot of the people participating actually know some of the people who have lost their homes, I hope that the money that was raised will just go into the pockets of these people, because that's really what's needed. They just need they have the sympathy, but they really need the cash. The insurance companies are corrupt. God knows the governments are corrupt as hell. These people need money because money rebuilds what they lost. And they need it soon and they shouldn't be delayed. And oh God, I could go on about how bad the mayor of LA. I mean, LA's had some good mayors. Tom Bradley was a good mayor, Reardon, but oh God, this one. Horrible, horrible. But anyway, the music was good, and thankfully, none of the politicians were there. I remember at the concert for New York City in 2001, Hillary Clinton was booed on stage, and that was funny. Not much funny happened after 9/11, but Hillary getting booed was funny. Um, I'm telling you, folks, it's free. I really should make you pay for this. Anyway, though, that's my review of the concert, and I encourage you all to see it. 6 hours, but look, you can skip the interludes and it goes by quicker. On most of the YouTube pages that have it, members of the audience have politely done timestamps of each of the artists. So if you want to skip to one of the artists you're particularly interested in seeing, you can do that. But I really recommend it. I really recommend it. Um, I would say donate to it, but I don't want that responsibility because I don't actually know who's handling the money. But what I will say is if if you have the Venmo or the PayPal of someone who lost their home, particularly in some of the areas where that are being ignored, I would just do that. If they could do it during COVID, why can't they do that now? I think we all know the answer. Anyway, like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Take care.